Hello everybody, and welcome to our very first ever Battle for Azeroth live developer Q&A. My name is Josh Allen, aka Community Manager Lore, and I'm here once again with Game Director Ion Hazzikostas. Ion, thank you so much for being here today to answer these questions.
My pleasure. Didn't we technically have a live Battle for Azeroth Q&A right after BlizzCon?
I believe you're actually correct. Our second ever.
First ever
in...
After Battle for Azeroth
Yes.
pre-sales.
Cool. This is true, yes. So Battle for Azeroth pre-sales have just gone live. I believe in North America at this point, and working on getting them live in other regions.
I think that should be rolled out globally as we speak. That process is ongoing.
Yep.
It's on Europe.
Obviously, there's maybe a couple of issues just due to load on the system, but we're super excited to get this content out there to get people started in unlocking the allied races, and yeah, the road begins. Yeah,
super exciting stuff. Awesome to finally have that out in players' hands and able to go ahead and pre-purchase that.
So just a couple of details, I guess, related to that, just to get information out there. I know there's a lot of questions circulating. So the way it works, allied races, if you purchase Battle for Azeroth, the next time you log in, if you buy through the in-game shop, you might have to relog. But when you log in as a 110 character, you'll get pushed a quest that summons you to the embassy in either Stormwind or Orgrimmar, depending on your faction, where you will learn about the requirements for unlocking allied races, and if you meet the requirements for one of the two races available to your faction, you'll be able to undertake the quest line right then and there to go ahead and unlock that allied race. One other thing, we know that with a 12 character limit per realm, we know that a lot of people have 12 characters, and while we were certainly raising that limit for Battle for Azeroth itself, we'd like to get that into your hands sooner, so we're actively working on a little change that's going to give everybody 4 extra character slots per realm. And that's not associated with pre-purchasing Battle for Azeroth. That's just going to be a global change. Everyone will have 4 extra character slots.
Awesome.
Keep your eyes peeled for forum and other updates, hotfix notes, and we'll get that information out there as soon as that change is live.
And it's still a maximum per account of 50.
Yes.
Correct. It's just the per realm limit.
Correct.
Is going up by 4 slots, which is awesome. Great. So we do actually have a real short video that we can look at that goes into some of the details. If you are pre-purchasing and you'd like to get started on unlocking those allied races, got a real quick video we can show you guys. Just about a minute. We'll be right back.
Are you on the video?
Oh, the video, boys. Damn, that was interesting.
All right, so that is. So I know I say it like always in these. I use the phrase "that's super exciting" about 400 times for every Q&A, but I feel like today's is super exciting because we have just unlocked that Battle for Azeroth pre-purchase.
Everyone kind of expected that.
To get in there and start on.
Everyone expected that.
So that should be super cool. Excellent. 2 of us, only millions to go.
Just us 2.
Just
no one else is excited.
All right. Well, as long as we're excited, then. I guess mission accomplished. Anyway, so let's get into these questions we've got lined up here today. Obviously, we had a lot come in about allied races just leading up to today, which is convenient. So we'll start with this first one from Patavita, who asked, how will the allied race unlocks work? Will it be an account-wide unlock? I'm exalted with the Nightfallen and would hate to grind out the rep on the Horde side as well.
Good question.
I also hate playing through storylines. No, so yes, the allied race unlocks are account-wide. Once you've unlocked it, you can make it across your entire account. The requirements are also account-wide. So if you've played Alliance characters primarily thus far, you have an Alliance character that's finished the Insurrection campaign and is exalted with a Nightfallen.
They asked this before,
you need a Horde character to unlock the Nightfallen, but you will automatically have met those requirements.
Because it's been already stated that it's gonna be
jump right into
multiple times
unlocking the allied race across your account.
I think they wanted to know more.
given that there is like a little bit of a storyline about how the Nightfallen are actually coming to the Horde and so on, it would be weird to be like, I'm an Alliance character helping you join the enemy.
That would be very strange.
Yes. Sunderlight was going to be released with the BFA.
Moving on, next question from Trivia Cow. You talked about this in the intro, but just to go through the question, will we get our extra character? I missed the moo. I'm sorry, moo.
How dare you?
Will we get our extra character slots with the pre-order? And as you were saying, we're actually just going to give everybody 4 extra character slots, regardless.
Exactly.
That's cool as well.
In the near future,
that's good changes.
The next day or two.
Awesome. Moving right along, next question from Extreme, who said, the addition of allied races provides great new customization options. However, with each race added, the pool of racial abilities to balance becomes larger. Does the team consider this a possible issue going forward?
Yes.
It's always something we're cognizant of when we're expanding, player combat abilities, whether in any form, whether it's new skills, new talents, modifications like the artifact, legendaries, all of the above. They're extra knobs and moving pieces in a system that is challenging to balance. That said, I think with racial abilities, for some time now, for the last couple of expansions, we tried to pull back a bit on the raw power level of these abilities. I think
Blood Elves
that probably reached its peak back in Mists of Pandaria with, the original form of things like Berserking and Blood Fury with dot snapshotting and and on the the history of the human racial on the PvP side of things. So I think at this point the overall power level of the racials is such that while there may be differences, they're much less likely to be a deciding factor. I think the big exception right now among the live racials is Blood Elf Arcane Torrent, which is just particularly
strong.
I would say dominating in a lot of ways, frankly, in both PvP and in coordinated dungeon environments. And that's something that's not, it's not about, is this worth 1% power or whatever. Having those extra interrupts, to say nothing of the silence, is actually just fundamentally transformative in a way that it enables tactics you otherwise wouldn't have. That's a racial we are likely taking a look at in 8.0, because it does need to change in some way. But otherwise, we feel pretty confident about the level of power in the racials we're adding and going to continue to add going forward. And it's more about flavor. And yes, there will be cases here or there where having a specific race or being a specific race is advantageous, but it's not the worst thing in the world as long as everyone gets their moment in the spotlight. And I think
Isn't Void Elf have teleport?
Adding new flavorful abilities.
Teleport is supposed to be OP, man.
Concern about balance issues
for any of the classes.
All right, makes sense.
Especially priests.
Yeah, I know that a lot of the new allied race racials. That's a difficult thing to actually say. A lot of the racial abilities from the new allied races, people have been looking at going, whoa, that seems crazy. Like, I know I was looking at the Void Elf racial and being like, wait, so I can just send a thing in that direction and then run over here and then teleport back over there, and that's
it enables
cool.
The Void Elf racial is really interesting. It's you have to see it and play around with it in game. It has some fun nuance to it, but it's not Mage Blink. It's not a direct copy of that, because the way it actually works is when you trigger the button, when you trigger the ability the first time, you send out this sort of little like void tracer disc that actually moves about as fast as you, a player, would run. And that just kind of drifts forward. When you push the button again within a window of time, you port to that location. So if you're in, a tight spot, you're standing in fire or something, it's not a teleport that's going to get you out of that instantly on demand. It requires pre-planning to use. So that makes it in many ways more limited than a lot of instant teleports that can be used reactively in an emergency. But it does enable some interesting sort of tactical gameplay when you can pre-plan if you know you want to, you're going to want to go somewhere a few seconds ahead of time. It's unique, flavorful.
It's not OP,
powerful,
man.
But not overly so.
Yeah, I'm just imagining in my head, like,
you kind of have to know when you need to get out of it.
Where we're like freaking out because someone threw their Void Elf teleport off in a direction, and the other team like split off so that one of them could be there and block them from wanting to teleport. I'm sorry, I'm kind of geeking out about that a little bit. Let's move on and answer more questions.
It's not OP, man.
Comes
you need to know when you
Rules
need to use it. Like
Twitter, who asked, why did you decide to make the allied races rep and achievement locked? A lot of people have been asking this question, especially since the initial data mining of allied races really started. So what's going on there?
Why not?
It's less about the specific details of the system and more about, I think, the story and what makes them different from regular races. I think these aren't long-standing members of the Alliance or the Horde. We wanted to introduce a wider variety of new races again, as we talked about at BlizzCon, this was sort of our spin on the oft-requested sub-races feature that players have been talking about for a long time.
Yeah.
And part of explaining, why did the Nightborne join the Horde? A lot of Alliance players are, rightly outraged, saying the Nightborne should have joined us. They made a stupid decision. We want to take players, and we want to take everyone through the story and through the experience of bringing this faction into your race, bring this race into your faction, rather. And the form that takes, the best way of measuring that in our game is things like reputation or achievements, right? The achievement is we'll complete the entire quest line that tells the story of the Nightborne insurrection, or the story of you uniting the High Mountain tribes and fighting off the Drogbar. And then reputation is kind of a complement to that. It
what
also,
is that Sylvanas picture?
it makes it more likely that you will have spent a good amount of time
Oh my god,
working with, helping, understanding this culture before you bring them into your faction, potentially play as one.
dude, it's Ion in
Obviously,
Sylvanas.
as the requirements are something we're likely going to look
Do
back
not
at
know it.
as time goes on. We'll see how much sense it makes as we get into later
Isn't-
expansions and
it's
that's
actually,
with
isn't it?
allied races. But in the space of Legion right now, for the 4 allied races that are available, these requirements more or less boil down to play the content, play the game associated with these zones, with these races.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think it's a good point to consider as well with the allied races, just that there is a sort of story that leads up to them joining a particular faction, and now that it's in players' hands, hopefully they'll have a chance to see that a little bit more.
And in a lot of ways, I mean, with other races, we gave you, that story was sort of front-loaded, and you played through it from 1 to 10 in the Goblin starting experience or what have you.
Yep.
Allied races instead start at 20. So I think instead of playing through, a very low-level experience with 1 or 2 buttons on your bar, you're playing through more of the content on the other end of things at your max level, and then jumping into the action a bit later on.
That makes sense. Next question here from Gwanin, who asked, will we be allowed to access Dark Iron Dwarves and Zandalari Trolls before the release of BFA? Or will this be after the expansion
That's the real
is
question.
out?
Zandalari Trolls, man. Who cares about Dark Iron?
Pre-release allied races are the 4 that were just made available today. They're the ones that are closely associated with Legion. Once Battle for Azeroth releases, after you're leveling to 120, going to the new lands, you will be able to begin working on the requirements to unlock future allied races, such as the Dark Iron Dwarves or the orcs from Draenor that we've hinted at, and then things like Zandalari Trolls. Again, that's going to be part of the story as the expansion unfolds down the line. Gaining the Zandalari as allies is a huge part of the storyline of Battle for Azeroth. Our whole point in going to Zandalar is to enlist their aid, but we're going to have to solve a lot of their problems before we get to that point. That's the story we're telling here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's similar to how the current...
Man, the only allied race that's just so much better than any other one is Zandalari Trolls, in my opinion.
You just sort of going, hey,
Just,
we've been helping
who
you
cares
out
about
with
Dark
problems
Iron
for a long
Troll
period
or
of time.
Dark
You should join.
Iron
It would be weird
Dwarves.
to, like, within
Compared
the
to
first
Zandalari
few
Trolls.
hours of questing
Let's be honest.
in Zandalar, just showing
So
up and be
you
like,
playing
hey
Horde the
guys,
next
so
person?
y'all want to join the Horde?
Ditching the
It's
guild?
great.
I think if you imagine, imagine if allied races had existed in Legion as a feature from the
Can
start.
Zandalari Trolls
High
be
Mountain and Nightborne
priests?
probably would have had similar requirements, would have played out
They
in very
don't.
much the same way.
I'm
right? You would have
100% sure they
leveled
would
up through Legion, gotten to know these new cultures,
Trolls are
worked
like
with them, solved their problems over the course of a bunch of story content, and then at the end of that journey, been able to unlock them. And so that's kind of the similar approach that we'll take with new cultures that you're meeting as we go into Battle for Azeroth and beyond.
Yeah, it's a big commitment joining the Alliance or Horde, so got to make sure we respect that in the actual game. All right, so here's a question that I know a lot of people are asking because it's about the only thing we see in Twitch chat.
I was about to say, I can't see the Twitch chat window from right here, right now, but I'm sure solo queue is being spammed and has been for the last.
Solo queue.
So, question here from
No
Fix
way.
and also apparently literally everyone else. Is there any chance that we might see 3v3 or RBG solo queue in Battle for Azeroth?
Yes.
Of course.
I actually
Honestly, I
do
would say
that.
unlikely.
There's
What?
no way this
So,
can be solo queue. Are you crazy?
first
There's not
off,
enough
I think-
players.
Wait.
we view the pre-made experience as one of the major differentiators between ranked rated PvP and solo random queue, random battlegrounds, skirmish arena. There's, to a large extent, if you could just solo queue, yes, there might be more involved matchmaking, but it very much blurs the distinctions between those two things. But I think the more important reason, and I know a lot of people have said, well, look at other games with PvP components. Look at other genres. Look
Come
at MOBAs out there across the board. Look at
Did
Overwatch.
you see that plugin?
All of these have successful solo-rated
For
queue
Overwatch.
systems. Why doesn't that work for World of Warcraft? I think probably the biggest difference, honestly, is that in all of those other systems, where composition matters, team composition matters, cooperation matters, there's much more flexibility after the team is formed to change your composition. If you're playing a MOBA, you go through, a pick ban phase before you actually jump into the game. In Overwatch, of course, you can change your composition on the fly. It's a core part of the game. But WoW's an MMORPG, and you're not queuing as you, the human being behind the keyboard. You are a Blood Elf mage, or a Dwarf Paladin, or whatever. That is your character. That's not flexible. And composition is very important. And it's not just which compositions are viable versus which aren't, but also your tactics that you develop and how you cooperate and how you play as a certain comp or against other comps. And so I don't think it's realistic for us to offer a good matchmaking experience that also...
That's stupid, man. I'm pretty sure everyone's raging about the solo queue now.
Fairly matched opponents.
What?
And
No one
reasonable queue
expected
times.
that.
I don't think that we could deliver all three of those
Why?
things
Like, for
consistently.
real?
I think it would produce a
Damn,
frustrating
what about the
experience.
PvP
Not
play?
enough players to be like...
There's also
What about
2-hour
PvP
queue
plebs
later.
like me, man, who can't be
regular basis,
can't
getting to know
be
arena
asked to
partners
join
or
a
RPG
rated
partners.
BG team or whatever?
You
Come
improve,
on,
you
dude. That's I think they're
cooperate,
missing
and
the
there's a lot
point
of
here.
depth to the gameplay there,
There's not enough
also on a social
players.
level.
Are you
I
stupid?
think
There
the
is.
approach we'd
I
like
know.
to
I know all the
is to make it
statistics.
easier and more accessible to get into these formats. And there's a couple of avenues we can approach there. On the RBG side, we know that 10v10 is getting 10 people together, keeping 10 people together, particularly with some of the comp goals that you have in putting together an RBG team. That can be very daunting. We've tried out some 6v6 formats, through a brawl. I feel like that has been promising, and that's something I think we're considering
6v6?
moving the RBG format to 6v6
Yes,
for
I think it's
Battle
a
for
good idea.
Azeroth,
Yeah,
which
that's
should
pretty nice.
lower the barrier to entry significantly just in terms of the logistics of assembling and coordinating and maintaining a group of that size. And separately, we'd like to add and improve social tools to make it easier to find arena partners and RBG partners. I think our community system actually has a lot of potential on this front.
What?
Rather than
Toxic
just relying on a
community.
premium group finder, I think I would hope that we will see cross-server communities forming that are, hey, this is a 1600 to 1800 arena community of people who are just let each other know when they're queuing, looking for more, get to know some familiar faces in there. You can, have scheduled times when most people are going to be around if you're trying to do RPG,
There's an arena
whatever
community?
else, and make it
Never
easier
heard of that
to
before,
get
dude.
those matches made. It's something where obviously this isn't an issue we consider closed. We're going to keep looking at it, keep working on it. But I think those are the approaches and those are the steps we're taking in Battle for Azeroth. And we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't like. I
should be
wanted to
clear
have a
that
solo queue.
Solo queue is something we talk about a lot.
Yes.
I'm
I
pretty
wanted
sure
to
I
have
have this
solo.
conversation.
I'm
at
pretty
least
sure
once
you
a
said
week
there's not
with
enough
somebody
people.
on the dev team.
I said there's a lot of people who
and
just
I know
can't
they
find
talk
the
about it much
groups
more than that. It's
and
something
don't do
we've
rated
been working for a
BGs
long
or
time,
arenas or
trying
whatever.
to
They
figure
just
out a
can't
way
find
to
the
make it
groups. They're
work
too
for
plebs to
World of
find
Warcraft.
groups like me.
But
I would
sort of the problem
definitely
you
would
run
love
into
a
is as
solo
you sort
queue.
of
You
go
just said
through
it's
the
gonna make it
imagining how
easier.
this actually
Yeah, they're gonna
works,
make a
you
community.
quickly
Let's
get
be
into
honest,
state
man.
where you
Community
see
tools
people
never work.
as a
Remember the guild
as a
finder
dev pack,
tool?
for example.
That
What
still
about
exists in the
you have
game,
What
right?
about
fairly
the raid
limited,
finder and all them?
what
Like they
players
work.
would call viable
Why can you not
comps.
do with
There's already a
But
raid finder for
realistically, you have
PvP, but it's
viable
still not
tools
as
as
good
well.
solo queue, man.
And so there's certain, okay, I'm a Death Knight, and so I never want to play with a Discipline Priest, for example.
Never want to play
Maybe
with
that's
this
your
priest.
personal choice or whatever. And so now it's like, okay, well, now you don't queue this person with a Discipline Priest, but the only other people who are available don't want to play with a Resto Druid or a Resto Shaman, so now there's only like two other, and you get to a point where like already we occasionally have issues with queue times at very high rating.
Yeah.
This would quickly get into a point where like, okay, I'd like to solo queue some arena.
Neither do I.
I'm 2.2k. My queue time is 30 minutes or longer, and that would be really bad. So again,
I'm
it's something
legit
that we
going
really
hard,
want to
just
be able to
saying,
figure out how to make work, but as of yet,
Just
we don't have a
saying.
solve.
Huh?
I'm going hard for
Making
BFA.
sure I'm not making up too much off the top of my
Dude,
head.
this is stupid.
Alright,
They're
question
just
here from
implement it and
Tobias.
see if it works.
This is a question that I'm actually going to answer. Hooray, I get to
Okay.
answer. Who
Fuck
asked,
off about
any
arena,
news
man.
about the arena spectator
Seriously.
mode? And the reason we
What
have
is
this one in
this?
here is because we see it asked a lot. and
Restart
clearly we've done
PvP is a big
very
part of
bad
World of
job
Warcraft. Stop hating on
communicating this because
PvP.
It's been in the game since 7.25.
Kind of.
So basically, the way it works is when you use the there's a slash command /invite spectator match, and if you look that up, you can just Google search it, and there's a couple of guides out there that you can check it out. We need to find a better way to communicate this ourselves rather than like. Obviously, go to Google and search for this so that someone else can tell you how to do it is not the most ideal way for you to get that information. But it is out there if you use the invite spectator match command. I believe there's a couple of add-ons that help automate that process for you as well. It just comes up, and it's automatically there, and you're able to get in there and use the same arena spectator interface that we use at like BlizzCon and tournaments and so on.
Yeah, and I think it was largely rolled out. I mean, it in its current form, it's definitely more of a power user tool. Right?
Yeah,
it's definitely there to help with community-run tournaments, things along those lines.
Yeah,
but it's there and it's something we can build upon going forward.
Yeah, and so if you are somebody who is considering running a tournament, even if it's just a tournament for a few of your guildmates or whatever, it is there available for you to use.
What if I'm considering to run a little bit the Mythic Dungeon Invitational /Ireland?
How you have to use it,
and we'll invite all the Irish for Mythic Dungeon Invitational.
Question here from Glade.
Do I get spectator tools?
Where
are my spectator tools?
The prestige system. The concept is great, but as it stands now, it's not nearly rewarding enough for how long the grind is.
So yeah, I think we've been talking a lot about what we think about prestige and how to carry the prestige system forward beyond Legion. I think the answer isn't to keep adding, dozens of new tiers with new mounts and cosmetic rewards at each of them, such that when somebody comes to the game a few years from now, they're looking at this ridiculous road ahead of them and like, wait, there's like 80 prestige levels for me to get if I want to unlock all these rewards.
Yeah.
At the same time, we also don't want to undermine the time people have put into the system over the course of Legion. People have worked, as you note, very hard and spent a lot of time playing Battlegrounds and PvP in general to earn the rewards that are available. So I think our current thoughts, and this is still early, subject to change.
I want the solo queue. I'm disappointed.
To keep the prestige system, to keep the prestige ranks that we have from Legion.
I actually would like to try out PvP a bit more with solo queue. I can't be bothered linking achievement. Like if I don't have an achievement, if I don't have enough rating from previous seasons, you can't join any decent players.
Similar to sort of the
you're just like stuck at the bottom. It's like Mythic Plus. If you don't have like enough WoW progress score, you can't get into a good team, and in order to get good WoW progress score, you need to get into a good team. So you're stuck at the bottom with very hard way, like unless someone carries you, you can't get out of it. It's the same with the PvP, I feel.
Benchmarks along the way that we give special recognition to, but again, it's very similar to that Overwatch sense and what your level means.
I don't understand why I can't just implement solo queue.
Similar systems. It's not to say we're not going to keep.
Comp matters everything. You just get like 200.
No, comp won't matter that much at lower ratings.
But we don't feel that the right way is to just add, an endless system there that's going to always expand and become completely unapproachable to anyone who's coming to the system for the first time.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that the prestige system is something that I'm really interested in personally because I just like doing random battlegrounds. So it's fun to have that sort of constant progression. So any sort of improvements there, sounds awesome. I missed an opportunity there. I could have done it. I was playing my shaman the other day, sort of flay into the meme.
But you missed the opportunity. So
I missed it. Yeah, I was playing my shaman the other day and I missed a different opportunity. So that was whatever. Anyway. Trying to
move on.
Question here from Dalaran YT, who asks, will there be more updates to honor talents in BFA? Feels like there are a lot of dead talents.
Is this like a PvP?
It's gonna be PvP. Will you calm yourself?
I forgot this question was in here. Unless you're in some very specific situation that could only be written in fan fiction.
I am interested in what fanfiction you're reading.
It was in that moment that Sea-Doo realized. Tidebringer.
You're trying to get your shaman stuff back in here, aren't you?
Okay, so he's playing shaman too much, dude.
Honor talent's definitely something that needs to evolve. This is actually something that, really in many ways is connected with the prestige system as well. We came into Legion with this structure that was, similar to other games, kind of Call of Duty-ish, where you earned honor talents that would prestige and originally reset that whole progression and keep unlocking them repeatedly. For a lot of reasons, that design didn't actually end up fitting or playing out in World of Warcraft the way we'd imagined. We're happy with where that side of things ended up. That said, there are a bunch of talents that aren't necessarily competitive within their individual rows. It also has ended up feeling much more than we'd like a barrier to entry for new people entering and approaching the system.
The guy's still laughing. He's trying to contain.
Like
he's trying not to laugh.
PvP, until you've unlocked all your honor talents, you're kind of at a significant disadvantage compared to everybody else. Maybe you have the leftmost column, but some of the best talents for your class, for your spec, maybe elsewhere. So it doesn't really feel like a reward the way we hoped it would. So a couple of changes planned to how honor talents might work in Battle for Azeroth. Current thinking is actually moving away from having an exact mirror of our regular talent system where we have multiple rows of 3, and instead moving to a larger bucket where, you know, there may be a dozen, couple dozen talents all in this single pool that you're choosing from, and you get to pick 3 out of that pool. Separately, we're probably going to keep a 4th slot that's just trinket customization, because I think that first row is actually one of the most successful ones. It's a mix of sort of what gameplay you prefer, what situations you're in.
Like
Are you a healer likely to be trained all the time in battlegrounds, or do you want, you know, like whatever you'd like to use to adapt or otherwise? And it's hard to really make a player choose between your trinket and other honor talents. The trinket's kind of special, so that's going to stand on its own. But so imagine that for your other 3, you just have a pool of many of the existing honor talents that you know and love, as well as some new ones. It gives us a chance to get rid of some that haven't worked out at all, that clearly are unpopular or aren't contributing to good gameplay. And you pick whichever 3 you want for the given situation, and that gives you more flexibility in constructing a build as well. If you want to focus on mobility, that's something you'll be more able to do when you're not just choosing within, let's say, a mobility row, but rather you might have multiple options that you can all focus on, or defense, or control, or whatever you prefer for how you want to play the game, how you want to work out with your teammates. And these talents will be unlocked just as you level up naturally, like your player level, not your honor level. So just in the course of leveling up to 110, 120, when you hit max level, you'll have access to the entire pool of talents.
That's good.
And even if you've never done a battleground before, you'll jump in with the same options available to you.
That's good.
To really customize your character and
some people hate it, some people like it.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. There's lots of different ways that could play. I'm a big fan of, here's a ton of options, you can only pick a couple of them.
For open world, they have to have leveling, you know, leveling playing field.
Fun and interesting stuff with the different honor talents as well. So that I'm really excited for that.
Just, overall, I think
I didn't know about
more freedom of choice and lower barrier to entry is kind of what we're approaching the system with.
Question here from Baby Back Rib, and we've obviously been talking about this a bunch already, but will there be any other PvP updates in Battle for Azeroth than the already announced world PvP changes? So we just went over a couple. Yeah, so like Prestige, Honor Talents, we've been talking about that.
A lot of PvP today.
I mean, as mentioned at BlizzCon, we obviously have a new Battleground that you're going to get a preview of in Silithus coming up soon. That will be dropping before Battle for Azeroth hits. New arena maps. In general, I think separately on the rewards and mechanics side, we also have other changes that we're working on. I think one of the biggest, most controversial changes we made to PvP in Legion was moving to fixed stat templates for characters when you are in any sort of
hate the stat templates.
PvP environment.
So imagine that if that was in PvE.
Organized PvP environment, whether rated or not.
People would riot.
And the goal there was, again, lowering barriers to entry, minimizing the importance of gear, or the sense that, you know, if you were just hitting max level or didn't have the latest, greatest stuff, you were at a hopeless disadvantage. And I think the way you used to gear up in PvP had some of those downsides to it. It was until you got your resilience up or whatever, you would just queue into BGs, get completely splattered, but kind of grind enough honor until you could get enough gear to hold your own. And then it felt
that's
like,
okay,
good.
You earned the right to participate. That's progression. That's MMO games.
So we're trying to solve all those things.
That's not. It's not need. Doesn't need to be solved. That's the whole point of the game.
Those RPG dynamics.
It's sometimes a bit too much.
Still underlying.
Dude, when it's the same thing in PvE. When you step into PvE, you have crap gear, crap optimization. You bottom of the healing, bottom of the DPS, bottom of the tanking, and then you slowly get better.
Customize their gear. We've actually taken some cues for how level scaling works in the outdoor world. How it's possible for a 103 player and a 107 player to group together and fight a dungeon boss and have the mechanics work out such that both of them can have a balanced and compelling experience. The healer can heal.
That is so tilting, man. I don't even do PvP, but consider. I see what happened to PvP. If that same thing was implemented in PvE, people would not play the game anymore. I can guarantee you. If this would happen, if you would get stat templates for PvE, the game would be dead. I can guarantee you, man.
Captain Mr. Obvious,
Captain Mr. Obvious, dudes.
They may still only be 5%
that is like
because of how the combat calculation.
If I was a PvP player in World of Warcraft, I would just like, man, I don't know. This whole change would be just like, see you later, man. I'm going to Gears of War.
Raid progression, for dungeon progression at endgame.
What's the game called?
We want
What is it called?
What the hell?
Gears? What is it called?
We need to gear up and.
What's the other game called?
PvP.
Grind my gears.
You
know what? Grind my gears.
You're gonna have.
Do you know what? Grind my gears.
And whatever else, and so you'll have an advantage, and that requires large power jumps. That's not what we really want in PvP. I think we want gear to matter, but not to the point that you don't stand a fighting chance against somebody because you haven't yet caught up. And so
Guild Wars.
Keeping customization.
That's the one. Someone in chat to remind me what that game is called.
What this also means is that it maybe lets us go back to some more familiar and perhaps successful systems of delivering PvP loot, things like vendors, and giving you more control over gear and what stats you want in a world where it's not just the item level of the piece that matters, but you do once again care about whether it has crit or haste or mastery.
Yeah, I remember a lot of, like in the Mists and to some degree in Warlords as well, actually to a fairly strong degree in Warlords as well, there was a lot of discussion around like, I like to play my mage stacking.
He's drinking. What is he drinking? Water?
I stack mastery on my
it's a fancy bottle.
arcane mage. No, I stack crit or something
I
like
will
that
drink
instead.
with Ion as well.
So it's really, really cool to see that sort of,
We're basically
that sort of
brothers
gameplay coming
now.
back to PvP. I know a lot of players have been asking for that as well. Question here from eroll64300 on Twitter, who asked, how will the world PvP work? You said that people across all servers will be separated between PvE and PvP status, but will all PvP players from every server be on the same instance, or will it be separated as it is now? We've had lots of different questions since we started talking about this at BlizzCon, in terms of just what the new world PvP situation even is. So could we get some clarity on how that's going to work?
So when you enable this mode and you venture out, you'll go to Orgrimmar, you go to Stormwind, you'll toggle it on. When you go out into the world, you'll be in a PvP-enabled version of the world with other players who've made that same decision. Now, obviously, not literally all players across the entire region can fit in the exact same instance of the zone. Otherwise, that would crash our servers and not be the greatest experience. But so they're still shards. But on the PvP side of things, we're able to sort of help determine the populations of a given zone with more of an eye towards faction balance than we normally otherwise have. We'll keep your groups together, all of that, but the goal here is, even if you are on, Mal'Ganis, which is 99% Horde in North America, or you're on Sargeras, which is just as skewed towards Alliance, when you go into a PvP server, you're going to see people from the opposite faction. You can actually have that PvP experience. And so part of what makes the system satisfying is our ability to construct the shard balance in that way. And now the one exception to this will be RP servers. So shout out to Emerald Green, similar boats out there. RP servers will still continue to follow the existing RP server rules.
I do not condone the views of papercut in any way.
Why'd you laugh?
Coalescing. Obviously, you can intentionally group across servers. That's still allowed. But if you turn on this mode on Emerald Dream, when you go out into the world, you'll see people from Emerald Dream specifically, and not random other servers mixed in.
Will it still on the RP servers? Will it still allow you to pick between the PvP mode and PvE mode when you go out in the world?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly. Yeah. So really, what we're saying is, in Battle for Azeroth and beyond, rather than having 4 server types like we do today, we're going to have 2 server types. It's going to be normal and RP. And on both of those types,
that's cool.
You can opt into PvP, and that exists as it always had. But we don't have that arbitrary distinction of, because you're on this server, you're forced into this mode, or you're on that server, you're forced into that mode. Especially in light of the fact that with cross-server grouping, and as it's been for the past years, you can hop between those modes freely as it stands. We just want to give players more control over that choice, and the ability to really build infrastructure and content behind it in a way that we couldn't when we knew that on PvE servers across the region, that content was not going to be accessible or make sense.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I know.
Alright, cool. Let's move on.
PvP servers.
Cool. Abed?
And
community?
That's because I enjoy that sort of like risk of being out in the open and someone might come out and try and attack me. But every once in a while, I'm just like, I just want to get my world quest done. I just want to go out, do this world quest, and go back.
Yeah, I know what it
or you
means.
just randomly join a world quest group, not realizing it, and suddenly see orange names around you, and realize, oh, I guess I'm on a PvE server.
What do you mean I can't kill these people? Oh, terrible. All right, question here from Anatheria. Actually, this ties in directly with what we were just talking about. Is it possible that we could get a server where all cross-realm features, including sharding, are disabled?
That's for ORP, basically.
I mean, roleplay servers work kind of like this in that we, except in the cases of extreme load.
How many ORP servers are there? Is there a big community of ORP players?
Involuntarily. That is to say, we're not just
like lore is a big part of World of Warcraft, but I don't know how many players are actually hardcore into the lore that they play ORP.
The exception to this is events.
I don't think there's that many.
Traffic when
but I know lore is a big
part.
For
Azeroth, and the entire server population is gathering around one of a couple of NPCs to kick off the expansion. We are going to shard the cities in that specific case so that the servers don't crash or you don't have terrible lag and you have a smooth launch experience. But we always view those as temporary changes, with the default state being default sharding and coalescing disabled. That said,
they're gonna shard you real good.
Completely disabled in the sense that you can't voluntarily do it if you want to do it. Right? We don't have a server where there is no cross-realm group
I don't want to be sharded.
or the ability to party for world class raids. And I mean that's been floated in the past as the concept of like a pristine realm or something like that. That's not something we currently have any plans on doing. I think we generally feel
I ORP with my multi-box account because of no friends.
They may be.
It sounds like a solution to a bigger problem.
But for roleplay communities, having them off by default preserves a lot of the server identity in those communities, and we get most of the benefits while still allowing for play with your friends.
Yeah, opt-in sharding.
They say sharding and like they know what he means.
If you don't want to do those, then just don't. But there's nothing that's gonna really, except for what you were talking about, nothing that's gonna really force you.
Go shard yourself, will you?
Cool. Next question here from Warfront.
It's happening. It's becoming asking, a meme. Sharding is becoming a meme.
What are the rewards of the new Uncharted Islands, and will they scale like Mythic plus Dungeons?
Nice.
So we talked at BlizzCon a little bit about islands, and
I think they have a
the
good concept
sort of
here.
Difficulty modes for it. How does that translate into how the rewards will work?
So I think we're still figuring out the details of the rewards. I think it's likely that islands will be a very lucrative source of Azerite, this new resource that you'll be using to power up the heart of Azeroth. But also, with multiple difficulties, we're thinking about normal, heroic, and mythic versions of the islands currently, as well as a PvP mode for them. On the PvP mode, you'd probably get honor, but with the increasing difficulty, probably much like other reward systems in our game. Some powerful gear, more powerful gear on higher difficulties. Details to follow as we kind of dial in the exact tuning.
They're not telling you anything. They're not telling you about anything.
Next question.
So it was like, whatever. We're just gonna waffle through this.
Do Warfronts take some elements from Warcraft RTS, like building units and being able to use them?
I thought they do.
When we first started talking about Warfronts, we sort of.
I thought Warfronts was exactly like tower defense in a way.
Kind of trying to take that that feel at least and bring that into World of Warcraft. To what lengths does that go, I guess?
It's definitely very heavily inspired from Warcraft.
Exactly.
Warcraft 3 RTS elements.
I thought that as well.
Buildings to units to resources, but at the same time, it's trying to tell that story and ground that fantasy in an MMO wrapper. And so when you say being able to use them, no, you don't get to build train grunts or footmen and control them literally RTS style by
like clicking around on them,
doing any of that. Another way of viewing it is
it's an iPhone app with the World of Warcraft.
To play as
RTS iPhone app.
So in many ways, you might be, you might be bringing resources back to your base, contributing them to help upgrade your town hall to level 2, so that you can build an armory, so that you can train this new unit type. And when you train that unit type, which you can do, they will just follow you into battle or charge off towards an objective. But you're going to be the one leading them towards the front lines to take over an enemy encampment and build your way forward from there.
That's the only obvious choice, to be honest.
But it's not an RTS,
right?
To be clear.
Yeah, it doesn't suddenly switch into a top-down clicking around.
It is core World of Warcraft combat mechanics.
With
I like it.
RTS inspired system.
I like it. Looking forward to that.
I imagine that's probably what most people were expecting after what we were talking about, but it's good to get the clarification. Question from Mad Max, who asked, during BFA, can Horde characters visit Kul Tiras and Alliance characters visit Zandalar? And will there be camps or bases of each
Probably
faction in
can't.
both
It's probably
islands?
complete.
I know we talked a little bit about this in the past as well.
You have to go to the other island.
It's sort of like Zandalar is the leveling experience for the Horde, Kulturas is the leveling experience for the Alliance, and then it sort of crosses over once you reach max level. But how does that actually work?
It crosses over.
So
Okay, I didn't know that.
Or did I just say everything?
Pretty much. So I think the glue here is what we alluded to in the war campaign. In many ways, it's the successor to the garrison campaign or the class order campaign. As you level up, the chapters of the war campaign are largely going to be themed around journeying to the opposite faction's subcontinent, finding what they're up to, understanding what they're up to there, building up a little bit of a stronghold, a foothold, a small base of operations that can serve as a staging ground for future activities. This will also introduce you to the zones, introduce you to the cultures that are found there, help explain and give you some motivation for why at max level you're going to want to go into the dungeons that you're finding there. Then at 120, yes, the whole thing opens up more formally. You'll have world quests on the opposite subcontinent. You'll have more story content that you're doing there. And it's, 6 zones, a whole world that's available to everybody, even though you're just leveling in half of it.
Okay, so kind of like, it's like the leveling experience is sort of like, let's go to this new area, we know this war is coming, let's go to this new area and try to get the support of the people that live in this new area, and then maybe make a couple of like small inroads, and then by the time you get to max level, now it's like, okay, whoa, the war is here, let's go fight.
Some of that, or just scouting and understanding, what are the Alliance up to, what's going on in Stormsong, and like you said, are there some people here who might be sympathetic to our cause and building up a sort of secluded, beachfront cove base that can serve as a staging ground for later on.
Babefront?
Example of many.
Babe.
Cool. Question here from Ranthe, who asked, in the dev water cooler it was mentioned that you want to return a lot of class and spec-specific benefits and abilities, a la CC availability and the like. How will this be balanced in order to avoid class stacking?
This is a good question.
Shut up. A little bit of this through data mining.
Shut up.
Over the past few days, but talking a lot about the class and spec specific benefits. How are we actually going to prevent that from turning into bring the class, not the player?
We're not always going to. Sometimes you should bring the class. Like,
fair enough.
Seriously, like if you're a pug leader and you have 3 mages and 3 hunters and 0 warlocks, and you have 3 applicants for a spot in your group, and one's a hunter, one's a mage, and one's a warlock, there should be compelling reasons to want to bring the class that you don't have.
Damn, I was not expecting that.
So to some extent, I think it's the opposite of class stacking. I think the goal here is actually
obviously that's
the
question.
A wide diversity of class and spec representation. I think the most successful RBG groups, the most successful mythic raids, these should have people with as many different tools as possible. And I think in a lot of ways, when there's too much homogenization and multiple people are bringing, or too many people are bringing this exact same tools, then there's going to be one who is best. There's going to be one who's, all right, well, we need an AoE stun. There's like 7 people who bring that, but one of them also brings the best AoE DPS, or one of them has the best AoE stun.
Affliction Warlocks?
So you just bring a lot of them to the downside to
Windwalkers?
Whereas if it's more like you're just trying to cover all your bases, then there's offsetting strengths and weaknesses that make a better, more balanced, more effective whole. That's ideal. And then obviously in smaller groups, there's some trade-offs. You can't have everything. If you're trying to make a dungeon group, there's different tools, different buffs. You're not going to have access to all of them regardless of what you do. And so your gameplay changes a little bit depending on whether you have a rogue who can help you skip past a pack, or whether you have, better AoE crowd control, or warlock for a gateway, or other tools that you might have. And that's kind of cool too. It's varied gameplay. It makes individual class abilities feel and play out in a more impactful way. So that said, it's also incumbent upon encounter design, other parts of the game, to create situations that make those tools and those abilities valuable. Obviously, if everybody has different tools, but one class happens to be useful 90% of the time, while other classes have tiny little niche effects, then that's not actually, we're not actually going to be achieving our goals that way.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting thinking about how the bring the player, not the class sort of mantra has evolved things since basically Burning Crusade when it first came in, and you were stacking like 5 shaman and stuff like that.
Exactly, and bring the player, not the class, I think is one of the most misinterpreted phrases over time. It really was. I mean, I remember when, Ghostcrawler posted blogs about this way back. It was early Wrath days. It was a response to a completely degenerate situation at the end of Burning Crusade, where we didn't have raid-wide buffs for the most part, except for things like, you know, Prayer Fortitude and Mark of the Wild. Almost everything was party-based. It was, you know, Battle Shout, it was Wind Fury Totem, it was Leader of the Pack, it was all of that stuff that led to this bizarre Tetris jigsaw puzzle situation, just constructing groups, where it wasn't like, you could say, we actually really want an extra, I don't know, an extra rogue, because they have a great tool that will help us on this encounter, but there isn't room in the melee group for them.
Yeah.
And unless they have Battle Shout, unless they have, you know, whatever else, they're not actually going to be effective. You're better off. You need to bring a caster because there is room in the caster synergy group. And that's the part of, like, that's what we meant when we said way back when, we want you to bring the player, not the class. We don't want to be in a situation where we're saying, okay, the only thing that will fit right now into this group composition matrix that we have is this particular narrow thing. Now, that can be interpreted as yes, no. If you have, you know, 7 players who are all hunters, yeah, you probably actually should at some point value wanting to bring a wider variety of classes. And I think that's also, you know, as the pickup group scene becomes more and more vibrant, more robust with tools like the pre-made group finder out there, you know, we know, you know, it's frustrating as a DPS class especially to apply to a group, and you feel like you just get turned down 5-6 times in a row.
You live that every day, don't you, paper cut?
When someone has tanks and healers and
I still haven't done heroic
availability for a group, they'll instantly get
heroic
20
or
applications
whatever
for 2 slots. And it's a very hard choice for them to, you know, sort through and pick out who they want to add. They often just go on, well, who has the highest item level, who has the highest Raider IO score, or whatever else.
Raider IO, not WoW progress. Triggered! Advertising!
Who is perceived to be 3% better.
Not WoW progress.
There should always be a space for your class and a spot for your class. It's going to make it more likely to find a spot in those groups, rather than, you know, feeling like because this patch...
It's confirmed, Raider IO is the #1 WoW progress. I mean, Mythic Plus score. WoW progress is from now on dead.
It's easy for things to...
Goodbye, WoW
progress.
progress.
Things have gotten so much to the point, what we're trying to get away from, so much to the point where your class doesn't matter as much, and it is just about what DPS you bring, how much your healing is, to the point where guilds will be like, sorry, you're not an Affliction Warlock, so we don't need you for our DPS, or whatever the top spec happens to be, the perceived top spec.
Oh my!
Let's call him Affliction Warlock.
Oh my!
Affliction Warlock nerfed! Affliction Warlock is getting nerfed, that's it. They know about it. They know about how Affliction Warlocks are OP. We didn't know that they knew, but they know.
All right.
They know.
That's
it.
Got terrifying there for a second. Very ominous. Question here from Deliaris, who said, in the water cooler you mentioned class utility and identity, then talk about specs, main role, strength, and weakness. Will BFA have more class-wide utility? So obviously we were just talking about this quite a bit, but looking at class-wide utility, and not necessarily something that, like,
these are good questions.
I specifically need a Shadow Priest for this, but a Priest in general.
I think so, yes. I think, again, looking back to the lessons of Legion and some of the philosophies that have come out of, you know, its development, we focused a lot on class identity, but I think that too often we probably over-prioritized spec identity at the expense of class identity. And that you're not just a subtlety rogue, you're also a rogue. You're not just a fire mage, you're also a mage. At the end of the day, that's what you picked at character creation when you decided you wanted to make the class. And where possible, there should be more class-wide strengths. Now, there's some limits there. I think when you have hybrids, there are some tools that we really want to keep closely wedded to specific roles, like major raid-wide healing cooldowns, for example. We want you'd have to be a restoration shaman to have that, or a holy paladin to have that. That's a core role function.
Healing tide for enhancement shamans? Confirmed?
You know, you had things like hybrid tranquility and other much more effective ancestral guidance, etc. You actually saw, in a lot of ways, DPS utility eat away at the core functionality of being a healer. And, you know, in Mist of Pandaria, you just had a lot of cooldown rotations that let you under-heal fights drastically and made the healer's job feel much less important. We don't want class-wide utility in a way that stomps on core functionality.
Right.
But when we're talking about tools of who is great at mobility, who is great at crowd control, who, you know, has unique abilities like, you know, whether it's everything from spell steal to death grip to whatever else, those are things that should feel like all members of a class can bring and contribute that.
That makes sense. Yeah, like if you're a shadow priest and you respec holy, at the moment that feels a little bit weird to me because it's like I hate the light. I'm all about the shadow. I changed my mind. Now I'm all about the light and I hate the shadow, but I'll change my mind again a little bit later when I want to do some world quests or something. So yeah, it's interesting to hear going back more in the direction of class being a class and then subspecs inside of it. Question from You Done Now, who said, with Legion, many classes were redesigned around the artifact and its traits. How are you planning on keeping all classes interesting if you're only planning to keep a few artifact abilities and traits?
So I think
only the cool artifact traits have been kept.
Classes were redesigned around the artifact.
Sure.
I think the classes were redesigned and artifacts were layered on top of them. Certainly, you know, tuning was certainly done with the artifact in mind, and pacing of rotations at max level through our playtesting of raids and dungeons at 110 in beta was informed by the artifact being present, but they weren't that inextricably intertwined. I think the model that we're looking at is one where there's a baseline, you know, a core set of abilities and tools that a class has. Then there's enhancements that you get from external sources. It wasn't just artifacts, right? It was artifacts, it's set bonuses, it's legendaries, it's trinkets, it's racials. And I think the main system where these things are going to live in Battle for Azeroth is Azerite armor. So you'll have at least 3 pieces of armor that you're wearing, with the ability to customize your character accordingly, with, you know, and some of the sorts of things that might have been artifact traits may find a home in this system. Literally not one-for-one mappings, but that type of effect, the sorts of things that are going to add depth and complexity and customization to your characters. Now, that's not to say we're not making a lot of changes where needed to baseline rotations, to baseline classes. If, you know, a class's rotation or a spec's rotation only flowed well at max level because of 5 points you had in a trait that reduced the cost of your builder and some extra filler that you had through an active button, and when we pull those things out, yeah, we realize there are some big gaps there. We need to fill those gaps. The plan isn't, just to like pull them out and say, all right, this is the class. It's going to go back to how it used to be. But that's what new things are for. That's, you know, maybe there's some baseline cost reductions. Maybe the way rotations flow is changed to accommodate the fact that the artifact's not there anymore. Because before there was definitely a bit of, you know, making some room for fitting this extra artifact active ability in, or making sure that you weren't, you know, GCD locked once you had the benefit of the traits. Now those constraints aren't maybe in the exact same place.
Yeah, like I'm just sort of as you're talking about this, thinking about playing my mage through my head, not my shaman, sorry, playing my mage, and how as fire, Phoenix's Flames is like one of the most important abilities. You need to be using that like constantly. Whereas Mark of Alaneth, well as Arcane, like yes, it's a very important ability, and you should be using it as often as possible. If suddenly Mark of Alaneth went away, I would just be like, all right, well, it's one less button to push every minute. But if Phoenix's Flames goes away, all of a sudden I'm like, how does my rotation even work?
Right, and so the answer there maybe A, your rotation needs to change, but B, if that's central
make
enough,
survival good again.
You want to make sure that people who like that gameplay will have the option to take that, so it's likely going to find its home in talents for fire mages, for those who want it. It's also important to bear in mind, you know,
if Beast Mastery lost an ability, then there'll be nothing to press.
Inseparable from your class. And that's actually
you just auto attack.
We are trying to improve with the Heart of Azeroth armor in BFA. You made all the unlocks and all the decisions around your artifact in September 2016.
It's like Demon Hunter.
Right? You earned all that stuff forever ago.
Yeah.
And at this point, you don't really know where your artifact ends and your spec begins because you haven't had to think about that or make that distinction in a really long time. And with Azerite armor, you'll have
released
much more
expansion already.
Changes, new things to look forward to, upgrades, customization, etc.
They're just talking about not making a class completely uselessly boring without the artifact. They're going to include the artifact abilities that they feel are going to be important to your rotation.
Design the artifact system the way we did if we were
Only very few
approaching it from the
classes that
perspective
really
of
depend on artifact
all
like
of these
Fire
things
Mage.
are going to carry forward and become
Right.
baseline parts of the class, you know, if anything in the past, I think we've spoken about how we regret a lot of homogenization and bloat that's come out of past expansions where we added 3 new abilities, 5 new abilities, not because classes needed them, but just for the sake of hitting those targets of, okay, everybody's got to have 5, let's come up with 5. The artifact was never about giving everybody, 20 new passives and a new active or 2. It was more about a temporary expansion and extension of your character's capabilities through this weapon.
I would want my artifact points
something
or
new
artifact
and
levels
different,
to somehow
also exciting.
translate into the new
Cool.
expansion.
Question here from Jorthas.
I know it's not true.
Are we going to see a lot more in-depth
Survival Hunter
rework
question.
for Survival Hunter? It currently feels extremely difficult to play with minimized reward and isn't suitable without certain stats. So obviously we said in the water cooler, I
Make
believe,
Survival
we were
Hunters
talking about
great
how,
again. Have they ever been great?
Whereas obviously Legion
to
and
play,
Warlords
though.
before it had a lot of very major changes to how classes worked. We're trying to not do that so much for Battle for Azeroth. I believe Survival Hunter is one of the exceptions there. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. Survival's seeing a pretty significant rework. Definitely some hints of that in some of the data mining that's been out there circulating so far. This is actually another example where we put spec fantasy above class fantasy. It's kind of implausible and a little silly that, okay, your class is a hunter. You are a hunter. Upon hitting level 10, you forgot how to use a bow. And you just decided, I'm going to focus on or specialize in also being a potent hand-to-hand combatant.
A bow?
But
What is that?
Nah, never mind. I'm going to put this bow down.
I can't hit people
put
with
this
this.
gun down and just be a pure melee. That was, I think, a step too far. I think we got a bit too caught up in the fantasy of, all right, you have the ranged sniper, you have the close-up melee combatant, and they were almost starting to feel like 2 different classes rather than sides of the same class that more heavily accentuated one element or the other. And so I think the new Survival is likely to have a better balance of melee and ranged capabilities. They will still be, uniquely the melee hunter, but they're still going to be a hunter, and that's important.
Yeah.
And then, yes, there's details about the flow of the rotation, risk
Yeah.
reward.
We're
all
going
of
to
that
introduce
I think,
aim shot to
separately
Survival
from
Hunters.
What's the fantasy of the spec?
Yeah.
Done.
But it's one of them that we've looked at and we said, okay, you need some work.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of other those as well, which we will be learning more about in the coming weeks and months. Question here from Moirin, who asked, is the removal of blink-type movement talents from Shaman and Druid on early BFA data
What the
mining
hell,
one of the
Blizzard?
results of the focus on class
What
uniqueness you
blink-like
mentioned in your
movement
blog
for
post?
Shaman?
What
or
did they
just
move
an
for Shamans?
isolated
I don't even
pruning?
know.
What
The dreaded
blink-like
keyword.
movement? What is it?
Probably the former. I think there's the fact that you describe them as blink-type movement talents is actually kind of telling, right? Because that's a mage ability, and that's where this all began. That's a core mage functionality, and thinking about it, there's value in that type of teleportation being something that is maybe not exclusively, but primarily the domain of the mage.
Blink is OP,
Whereas
that's why.
a druid, they should move quickly. For them, it's been more about dash, that space, right? They transform into animals, and they can have bursts of speed.
Gust of Wind removed,
it's not
was
that
it?
only mages can
Gust
have
of Wind
movement
is not
abilities, but
blink.
also mobile. Of course, there should be other movement abilities, but in terms of the exact flavor of how it
I don't
presents
consider
itself,
that blink-like.
both the druid and the shaman really transform into something else.
I know the space a
that's-
bit's been removed.
Whether it's you're free
It's
from
Tiger's
restrictions,
Dash
you can
now.
move
Increases
faster.
your movement by
Ghost
200%.
Wolf and travel form, cat. Those are more the spaces where movement is appropriate for those classes, as opposed to, I think, frankly, just a very loosely re-kitted, re-described version of Blink. Like Displacer Beast is basically just Blink.
Yeah.
And Blink is super fun. No question that it's a fun ability to have. No question that it's a potent ability to have. And losing a fun and potent ability, not super fun. I certainly don't expect people to be excited about losing a tool that they enjoy.
Finally it's gone. Yeah.
Though, for those of you who are Wild Charge devotees, whatever, it's not too much changes.
Man,
Again, the
to
key
be honest,
here
Displacer is so
and
OP.
really, the dreaded P word, the point of pruning is it's
Displacer is
scaling
so
back
OP.
some
I'm gonna
things to
miss
make
it.
room for others. It's not, the point here isn't, we want druids to be weaker all around. They're too strong, we're making them weaker. It's, we'd rather double down on strengths. We'd rather find ways in which they can more uniquely differentiate themselves.
I'll miss it.
Strong, potent, fun, valuable in their own way, rather than just copying the thing mages can do.
It's a pleb ability. Displacer Beast is a pleb ability. You mess up completely, Displacer Beast, you're fine. It's a complete pleb ability. It gets you out of the situations that you shouldn't be. It gets you out of those situations.
Titanforged weapons in BFA and the implications of the Titanforged system when applied to what could be the most crucial item slot for a lot of classes and specs. We've gotten tons of feedback about Titanforging and Warforging, especially if we've gotten later in Legion. And I think a lot of people are now looking at, wait, so my artifact weapon is going away. I'm going to be using regular weapons again. What does that mean with Titanforge? Am I going to get like a plus 80 Titanforged weapon and become a god? Like, is that the sort of thing that's going to happen, or is that something that we're keeping an eye on?
No, that only happens to the player who only runs LFR once ever. That's who gets the plus 80 Titanforge.
Yeah.
These tilt masters.
So yes, this is a great question, great point. I think, we've heard a lot of feedback on Titanforging, on the variants, and oh my god, this is a horrible injustice. Look at this person who has a plus 45 eye level Titanforged item. This is better than what I have as a Mythic Raider. And it's not fair that
Mythic Raider shade
not being properly rewarded, etc., etc. I think one of our core responses to that throughout has always been that it all averages out in the long run. The LFR Raider who has a 975 helm, well, they probably have LFR gear in their other slots. Their average character power isn't meaningfully improved. Slightly improved. It's an awesome excitement for that player.
It's not always.
But
let's be honest.
Day,
my alt is basically the same
the
level as my
best gear.
Not really.
Weapons definitely threaten to disrupt
he's right.
it because yes, not all slots
still
are equal.
Titanforged weapons still exist.
Massively Titanforged two-handed axe that could actually, suddenly vault you ahead of literally a tier forward in some ways in terms of performance. That's probably a bit too much. So our current thinking here, this isn't 100% final, current thinking is to not let weapons Titanforge, to let them Warforge, so maybe +5, +10, but not beyond that at all.
That's good.
So that also maybe helps preserve some clear tier distinctions in terms of what weapons come from, the difficulty of content.
Yeah.
And just as a reminder in general, plans for Warforging in Battle for Azeroth, we're planning on carrying forward the system, but pulling back on it in a couple of places. The Azerite armor slots will not be able to Warforge or Titanforge at all.
Yeah.
Those items are complex enough already without adding the extra decision-making factor of, wait, but this has slightly worse traits, but it's +5 Warforged. Yeah. What do I want to just... Don't worry about it. We want that
just
to be...
Just no.
We want those to be clear upgrades or side grades and not in that middle ground space. We also feel like Warforging and Titanforging in particular is probably just a bit too common in Legion. I think that it actually undermines a lot of the feeling of continued reward when
they should make everything Warforging. I agree. Everything should just Warforge.
Difficulty of a raid, for example, that by the time you're progressing on the middle of heroic, you're actually not getting as many upgrades as you'd expect or want because you have all this Titanforged gear. I think keeping it as a surprise, keeping it as a moment of excitement when it happens is valuable, but the second it becomes so common that it's distorting overall gearing patterns and also complicating tuning in some ways, that's probably gone a bit too far. So it's not going away, but we are pulling back from it. Hopefully,
believe it or not, I actually don't mind Titanforging. I mean, not Titanforging,
us I think while limiting some of the downsides the players.
I mean, if they reduce the chance to really low, then
yeah, that makes a lot of it is really fun when you get a Titanforge.
I like when I'm just doing a random get like massive upgrade. Obviously,
this one didn't touch
it's too
exactly.
It happens too often. Like you said, exactly.
It's not going to be worth using. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Or when you're it's reliable enough that you feel like you should go farm something that was a year-old content. Because
I can
it's
kind
realistic
of get it.
that you could get a good Titanforge on it, and thus it becomes an obligation. That's also not great.
All right. Well, that's all the time that we had. So thank you very much, Ian, for being here and answering these questions.
My pleasure.
As always, it's been an absolute blast. Battle for Azeroth pre-purchase is now live, so definitely go and check that out. Get access to unlocking
some
the
decent
allied
questions.
races.
A lot of PvP content, which I don't mind too much. Solo queue is not there, which I'm sad about.
Today, if you've already met a lot of
PvP templates. A lot of people who are watching, what do they say about PvP templates?
So definitely go and check that out.
They're kind of gonna keep some of it.
Thanks for all these questions that came in, and we will see you guys next time.
Sounds great. I'm gonna go level my allied race.
Nice.
Titanforging, kind of in there, but removes the chance of it. Pretty good. Pretty good. What do you think about it? What do you think about the changes? Are you crying already that Warforging is still there? Are you crying already that Warforging is still? I think it's fine. I think Warforging would be the complete solution. Just let it Warforge. But if Titanforging happens very rarely, like no one's gonna care if it's gonna happen really rarely. It's just gonna be like, you know, lottery win kind of deal. Right now you'll be running like, you know, if you're like a heroic raider, if you're a mythic raider, you'll be running heroics, you'll be running normals, because there is a high chance, let's be honest, there is a high chance like of getting something that's going to be greater than the difficulty that you're doing right now. Like, you can get mythic gear in heroic quite easily, to be honest. I've seen a lot of like 960, 965, 970 loot being dropped in heroic. The same can be said for normal and things like that. Right now, Titanforging is out of control, man. It's out of control, and I think it's good that they're at least reducing the chance. Obviously, Ion wants to keep the Titanforging a thing. Obviously, Ion wants to keep the Titanforging a thing because he knows there is, you know, there is excitement in it. There is somewhat excitement in it. To get some crazy. There is everyone loves getting a Titanforge. It should be just. I actually kind of came around this idea, and I think it's gonna be good. I think it's gonna be a good change. Just reduce the chance of Titanforging. Don't make weapons. Don't make pieces. Like, weapon is a huge part of your DPS. Like right now, like, you know, artifacts. Everyone forgot how good artifacts are. Like how good a weapon is. But before that, like, you know, melee, DPS, two-handed sword or whatever used to be, you know, the thing that used to increase the most your damage and things like that. So having that to Titanforge is going to be like, I can already see it, man. Like LF4 persons getting like, you know, like 30 item level Titanforging, and all the other people, mythic raid or whatever, is gonna be like, oh my god, this guy just got the biggest, I hate it so much, delete this game, I'm quitting, I'm unsubscribing from this game. I'm gonna send a 2-page letter to Blizzard telling about this LF4 guy who got this Titanforge and increased his DPS by 10%, and me not getting anything. I can already see that happening. So
you just described my...
I could just describe what you did, right? I'm sure you have plenty of letters. Like, they probably have you flagged. There's no more letters, so they just send your letters straight to trash, right?
I'm just banned, dude.
You're just banned. You're just banned. I can already see it happen. So not having weapons Titanforge is going to eliminate the salt. It's going to eliminate the salt. So that's good. That's really good. I appreciate that. I appreciate for my sanity. Like, if although it'll be funny to run LF4s and to see the people cry about it so much, I think it'd be so great. But yeah, I think overall it's decent enough changes. I think PvP was completely disastrous. No solo queue, all of that stuff. I thought that was like, if I was a PvP, I'm weighing in, even though I'm not a PvP player. If I was a PvP player, I would be pretty upset about it. I would be pretty upset. But what do I know? I don't play PvP that much. I don't know.
Does anyone know how long it takes to unlock the allied races?
It takes.
How big is the quest?
It takes 10 years, dude. Either way, I'm most likely gonna put this on YouTube's. So all the people who are in the chat, you're forever famous. You're forever famous. Let me know how you feel about the PvP changes. Let me know how you feel about the Warforging. I feel those are the biggest questions. The class balance questions were, you know, it's basically all the class balance questions that they answered were answered in the dev water cooler post.
They didn't really include anything new at all.
They, like, it was all there. It was basically like, you know, we're gonna introduce class uniqueness. That class uniqueness is going to eliminate class stacking because you wanna have as many different classes as possible. That's what they basically said. Let me know how you feel about all these changes, and I'll see you in my next video.